on our like programs. So at the end of the talk, we'll be circulating a sheet. So you can just mention the details of future programs. So right now, just Akhil Faisal to come and give a brief introduction of today's program and also to introduce the speaker. Good evening, all. This is a very good attendance that we have today. We have a lot of good time. So our speaker for today is Sainath. He doesn't need much of an introduction, and this again is a sign of that. P. Sainath is one of the leading literary and scholastic voices in the modern contemporary Indian socio-political discourse, and being the founder editor of the People's Archive of Rural India, which is an independent multimedia digital platform launched on 2014 that carves the alcoves of rural India beyond the purview of mainstream media. He also served as a rural affairs editor of The Hindu from 2004 to 2014, and being a recipient of numerous awards including the Fukuoka Grand Prize in the year 2021, the World Media Summit Award in 2014, and the Ramon Magsaysay Award in 2007. He is most reverently known for his book, Everybody Loves a Good Drought, published in the year 2000, which again most of you might be very familiar with. And as we'll be discussing today, his much anticipated and discussed work, Last Heroes. Now, as we all know, we are all observing the 75th year of Indian independence. And as we observe the 75th year of independence of India from colonial oppression and tyranny, we tend to proudly celebrate the prominence that line the pantheon of Indian nationalism and the ideals of secularism and democracy, and that is foundational to our nation and society. But at the same moment, we also tend to forget to those. Maybe there are people who did not make it into the forefront of history's titles as history moves on. There are people whose names are unremembered and unheard of. And that is exactly what this book discusses. So Sainath's latest book, The Last Heroes, Footsoldiers of Indian Freedom, which is published by books and is available outside, you can get it, purchase it, is a book that remembers the lesser known figures from India's freedom struggle. In this tracks the role of ordinary, everyday people in achieving independence, such as the innumerous farmers, laborers, homemakers, forest produce gatherers who stood up to the British. The last heroes tell their stories, giving them the due recognition they deserve. And this is very important, as we all know, the role of the common human being, the common social and political being of our country in the modern political discourse is very important. As we currently observe in politics and economics, we see the role of the common person. And in discourse, Sainath's voice remains undeniably resistant and relevant. An acclaimed analyst of poverty, religion, and caste, as a vocal critique of communist and sectarian inclinations in the contemporary politics, Sainath's writing resistance to the monolithic political framework of India, of today's India. So today's talk would be very interesting and very relevant, and I believe we can all gain a great deal of insight from today's discussion. So please join me in welcoming our speaker for today's session, P. Sainath, once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Forgive me, I have a horrible throat, but as I should put it, a lot of this is about which way you approach history. The great man theory of history. You know, one or two or three heroic individuals who changed the world. Or people as the motor of history. Gandhi, for all the deification done of for all the deification done of the Mahatma, he was very clear about this. In 2000, what did I say? In 1914, a triumphant Gandhi returned via London from South Africa, where he had conducted this successful struggle representing the Indian laborers. So there was this huge program for him in London. The liberal English crowd and Indians like Sarojini Naidu. And of course, there were 15, 20 speeches of praise for Gandhi. At the end of which, in his reply, he says, you're directing your praise to the wrong address. And he says that, look, I was just a face and their lawyer. The struggle, the success of the struggle entirely came from the indentured laborers. They were the people who made the struggle. And, and he gives you examples. In that speech, I mean, it's not false modesty. He gives you multiple examples of ordinary people and said that without this, it could not have been done. Without this, it could not have been done. The most moving example Gandhi gave was a man called Hati Singh from Punjab. Hati Singh was a 75-year-old and former indentured laborer. He had completed, gone back to Punjab, and suddenly when Gandhi is at the forefront of this struggle and arrested and jailed, Hati Singh, who is a great-grandfather by then, left Africa to take part in the struggle and lands up sharing a jail cell with Gandhi. Gandhi is actually very annoyed with him. That, you got your freedom, you went back home to your family. Why the hell are you back here? So Gandhi asks him very testily, Hati Singh, how could you come back? And Hati Singh says, Gandhi, how could I not come back when my people are in struggle? It's a very, very moving anecdote. And, and Gandhi uses it to illustrate that there would have been no struggles without the Hati Singhs of the world, an indentured laborer. In 1931, again, Premabai Kantak writes a steadfast resistance and contribution. The reply to those points is one sentence, 2 lines. He says, great men seem to be the cause of revolutions in the world. The people themselves are the cause. That's all he said. 1 line. However, we've succeeded historically in doing to Gandhi exactly what he said was the wrong thing to do. So you have you have several tellings of what happened in the freedom struggle. And it's not bad that every generation should see a retelling, even a positive. New evidence comes up, new documentation becomes available, new perhaps comes up. I've just received the lyrics of a song written after the Battle of Plassey, which women in Bengal, in the paddy fields and in weaving, sang for the next 180 years. A a song very sympathetic to the Nawab of Plassey. They were very clear who the enemy was. They say those Telangas in their red coats, that is the British troops. So, one major way of looking at the freedom struggle is that this was an England, being this enlightened mother of parliament, decided that, yeah, you were ready to rule on your own. This is complete rubbish. The British didn't leave. You kicked them out. Be very clear about that. If they were just leaving on by themselves to their Caribbean colonies and African colonies for another 20 years, they held on to their Caribbean colonies till 1968. 3 years after being, they were massacring 25,000 human beings in Kenya to suppress the Mau Mau, their Quit India version, their version of the Quit India movement, their independence struggle. Out of the goodness of their heart, they held on to the colony called Belize, Central America, till 1980. Okay? So this is one telling, and it's all. We won't go into it further. It's like people try to tell you that, as colonialisms go, we were lucky to have the British sporting guys. Different. It could have been the Dutch. I want to tell you one thing, whether it's colonialisms or fundamentalisms. Choosing between colonialisms and fundamentalisms is the chicken choosing which sauce it wants to be cooked in. Okay? Honey glazed is one. It's as stupid and ludicrous as that. Choosing between fundamentalism and saying this one's better than that, or this colonialism was better than that. One of the most horrible things, I see a generation before me which has been robbed of its history. How many of you, let me also say up front, my generation did the robbing. Yeah. How many of us, you see, you're having 3 years of celebration. Okay, there's a 3-year program. Has anything in your media in the last year, has anything in those programs of celebration told you what was your freedom struggle? Why were you fighting? Who were you fighting? What were you standing up for? By the way, what were you were fighting from independence, for independence from what? Tell me. Sorry? Okay. Why? What was wrong with British rule? They're sporting people. Mother of all the parliaments. It is something, right? Yeah. What did colonialism do to it? Can you, yeah, that's true. Can you elaborate or quantify or explain what was that exploitation? What did it do? For instance, how much did it loot over 200 years? We now have figures for it. How much did the British siphon out of your country?
Before, when British came in, our GDP accounted for 3%.
Yeah, 18% of GDP. Yeah, well, that is correct. I'm looking for other ways of quantifying it. That's one way. What did they do? What was the impact?
It is estimated that they
That was that was a figure 117 years ago given by Dadabhai Naoroji in Poverty and Unbritish Rule. But he was just looking at tariffs. What was looted through that mechanism? Excise, tariffs, stuff like that. There are much bigger, wider estimates. He didn't have the benefit of having the data of 200 years behind him. And that actually, Gandhi referred to Dadabhai's book as my teacher in economics. Yeah, but
Social and political oppression.
correct.
It destroyed our educational system, our knowledge system.
Division of the country.
It left people
Those were
with
the
separate
jazz.
constraints like poverty, hunger, illiteracy, and we value
Poverty and hunger.
That poverty and hunger was there in India since very long, sir. I
Really?
don't agree with this statement.
You know, you are absolutely right. Poverty and hunger existed before. But I think the scaling up of that poverty and hunger, we have very clear facts and data which are not new, which have been available to us for 100 years. And the availability of that evidence was the spur of your freedom struggle against fight against the economic exploitation. Yeah.
Pertinent example, I guess, and the one that's still being taught, which is representative of all of India, despite relegated to a part of it, was the Bengal famine. Mostly just in how it was caused through the exploitation of the land, through excessive growth of the indigo farm, who was kind of led to land being depleted, and how it led to the people not being able to plant anything else for their own sustenance, and how it led to one of the most devastating times. And that was just one example of the lack of care the British had for anyone.
By the way, the impact, and you should all remember that when we're speaking of India, then that included what is today presently Pakistan, all the way. It included today's Bangladesh. It included stretches into what is today Myanmar, little bit. Okay, so you had all of this. Okay, let me try. And that's absolutely right. What you said is absolutely correct. In the last of the Bengal famines, they exported food grain, allowed 1.3 million human beings a conservative estimate to die. Okay, when I asked about what happened under colonialism, you have to look at the human horrors. 4.3 million human beings died. Not only did the British export that food grain, they banned import of grain. There's a beautiful book by Madhushri Mukherjee, Churchill's Secret War. I strongly urge you to read it. And by the way, happening, Mr. Churchill's, many of our learned judges in courts quote Churchill. Mr. Nani Palkiwala quoted Churchill on democracy in every speech that I heard Nani Palkiwala give for 40 years. I used to look for the speech only to find. Churchill said of you guys, I hate the Indians. They are beastly people with a beastly religion. They breed like rabbits. This is what he said of Indians. He was an admirer of Mussolini. It's a different set of circumstances that led them to collide later. He admired Mussolini, and by the way, the inspiration for European fascists came from the doings and denudations and deprivations of British colonialism in. The British were into eugenics. You know what eugenics is, right? 70 years before the Nazis came to power in Germany. Remember, in this country, 1871, the British passed an act, the Criminal Tribes Act. They criminalized 200 tribes, which means that if you were born into the Karuar tribe, yeah, or you were born into one of the other tribes by genetic order, you were genetically a criminal. They pick on and criminalized 200 tribes. All those were tribes that resisted British sovereignty, British sovereignty, that defended their ownership of the forests. That's what happened. Anyways, we talked about Bengal. Do you know how many famines there were under British rule? If you look at pre-British rule and post-British rule, one mass famine. You came close to it in 1967, but you didn't have, and you had great public action in Bihar, led by J.P. Narayan and others, who went and, thousands of volunteers went. But from the day you kicked out the British, you never had another mass famine. You had 31 one in a year. 31, 24 major ones. Tens of millions of human beings died of that hunger and poverty. So I'm trying to address that point about hunger and poverty was always there. Sure. But you know what? As she said, you accounted for 18% of global GDP before the British took over the country. There are measures done by economic anthropologists and demographers working, which is how you got the 18% GDP figure. There is work by economic anthropologists and demographers. Stuff. Robert C. Allen, an historian, has shown us long back that at the end of the first 100 years of British rule, extreme poverty in India, was accounted for 23% of the population. Between 1880 and 1945, they more than doubled that to 53% of the population living in extreme poverty. Real wages in the history of India, calculating backwards to Mughal time, fell to their lowest ever under British rule, leading to that hunger. As Amartya Sen, by the way, the one thing the Bengal famine gave you of 43, it gave you Amartya Sen, who was an 11-year-old kid. People come in and die on the streets. And from that day, his mind functioned on this issue of famine and hunger. And he came to conclude, he was seeing godowns that had plenty of grain. That's where his thesis came from, fleshed out 50 years later. Famine is not an absence of food, it's a collapse of purchasing power. Okay? It's true of the Ethiopian famines. There was plenty of grain in Ethiopia. So, imagine that in a 40-year, 50-year period, you've doubled extreme poverty. Now, the 23% that existed before was also substantially contributed to by British rule. 31 famines, tens of millions of human beings dying of hunger in the famines. But, oh, by the way, the very first famine, 1770 Great Bengal famine, none of these were accidents. Why don't we have the accident after 47? None of these were policy driven, and you have the admission of Warren Hastings and Robert Clive on record. Warren Hastings in 1776 writes to the board, boastful letter to the board of the East India Company. Notwithstanding the decimation of fully a third of the population. That time he's talking about Bengal. But there Bengal included Bihar, Purnia, all these places. Notwithstanding the decimation of fully a third of the population and the widespread, famine, we were still able to raise revenue, and that we were able to do so owed to the former rents being violently upheld to their standards. He uses the word, we violently upheld those standards. Okay? It's available for anyone who wants to read these letters. In 1840, the chairman of the East India Company addresses the British Parliament, again a boast, where he addresses the Lords and Commons and everyone and says, we can sincerely say that this company has succeeded in converting India from a manufacturing power, which it was. This company has succeeded in converting India from a manufacturing power to a country exporting raw produce. We are giving all sorts of jobs, and you now have a generation of completely revivalist racist historians like this Niall Ferguson and others telling you those guys were not, they were telling honestly, a few million human beings, but we raised revenue by violently upholding the standard. Hey, we converted India from a manufacturing power. Why are you so reluctant to take their word? They're telling you honestly, because they're speaking to their own bosses. That's the thing. Then, how much was siphoned out of India? Utsa Patnaik has 2-3 years ago done a large canvas calculation of, and she keeps cautioning you. Okay, she's based on pound sterling, US dollar rates, which were more or less consistent at $4.9 or $4.8 to a pound for about 150 years. From India, how much money was siphoned out by British colonialism from India? 200 years. What is it that we keep boasting to ourselves, at least our Prime Minister keeps boasting to us? And in 5 years' time, India will be a $5 trillion economy, right? The British looted US dollars. 44.6 trillion US dollars. Almost 10 times, 9.5 times. Yeah, the economy we are aiming to be. But it's not a fact stretch, but just to give you a sense of the scale of the loot. 44. Can you imagine? You take every year $500 billion. What happened was this. When the British came to India, the British life in India life expectancy in India was slightly higher than those of and Wales. Wales and Scotland. Wales and Scotland. Where do you get those numbers from? WS, William Digby, W.S. Lilly. You get these figures. They're estimates. Okay, but so still leave that. By 1921, what was the life expectancy of an Indian? 21 months. It was considered when they came, life expectancy of England and higher than that of Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Okay. Then the death rates began to multiply. 80, they had already brought the death rate to 37.4 per 1,000. Okay. Next 30 years, 1880 to 1910, for which you have solid data, the death rate went to 44. You multiply that into millions and then you'll see what kind of death. Do you know today we are still debating, or at least silently outside the mainstream media debating, how many people actually died under COVID, right? How are calculations made on all the major sources in the world which do that tracking have said India lost between 2.5 million and 4.5 million human beings to COVID. Indian government says nothing of the sort, 486,000 people died. By the way, how are these estimates made? Oh, Lancet says 4.5 million, Johns Hopkins says 4.5 million, but of course that's all a conspiracy against India. The whole world has nothing else to do but conspire against India. That's it. Everybody is so jealous of us. And at the same time, we reconcile that with the statement that Modi has changed our image in the world. That means he's changed it for a lot worse. Because how do you reconcile these two things? There is this huge propaganda. Every nation is against us. Every company is against us. Everybody is against us. Right? But anyway, so they said how are the figures actually derived? Every society has a mortality rate, a death rate, whatever you want to call it. So you have an average death rate over a decade, over a year, over in a given year, like the 2 years of COVID, you count the number of deaths over and above, and that's what is called excess deaths. You've heard the term? That's called excess deaths. It's on that basis, anyway. It's so stupid. Now, this excess deaths method has, in the last decade, been applied by economic anthropologists and economic demographers. The latest, last year, peer-reviewed journal, World Development, has a paper by Jason Hickel and his co-author, Dylan Sullivan. The paper is called Capitalism and Extreme Poverty, a study of hunger, longevity, human height, etc., etc. Do you know the calculation of excess death in the British rule? How many do you think were the excess deaths? Want to take a shot at it? They have very solid figures from 1880s when our census is based. But before that, they are making assumptions on our death rate being similar to England. Economically, you accounted for a greater share of GDP than England. All this. You know the lowest figure they derive. You according to the variables and assumptions, you'll get different figures. But the most stringent figure, 1880 to 1920, 50 million human deaths, not counting the famine deaths. Overall, 168 million human deaths, and they are saying, whichever way you cut it, India lost in 5 decades, in just 5 decades, close to the vicinity of 100 million human beings due to colonialism. Now tell me that if 1% of 1% of that had happened in a European country, you'd be screaming genocide. Yeah. Here we still run an English judicial system created to administer a colony. Yeah. So this is what colonialism did. I'm giving you a very tiny bit of what it did. Yeah. It exterminated whole tribes and communities. And this is what sparked struggles for freedom and independence. The freedom struggle did not start with civil disobedience and formation of the Congress Party. It did not come to you from returning Oxbridge elites. Yeah. My granddad was one of those elites expelled from Ireland for joining the Sinn Féin and participating in the Eastern Uprising. Came back to India and benefited from this participation in the freedom struggle, which is why my book is about those people who gained nothing from it personally. And I remember as a kid, when he was a trade unionist, people who looked from a different class of society would drop it, and he would always tell me, it wasn't guys like me who brought you independence. It was these people, these women, these men. They brought you independence. Okay? Do you know that? Another myth is that this freedom struggle all happened up north. Yeah? UP, Bihar. For God's sake. 100 years before the first bullet was fired in 1850, the Adivasis of East India, remember, the curse of colonialism came first to the east. It follows that there would be the first protest there. The Adivasis of Jangalma, 40 years, 3 years of Lassie, fought the British to a standstill until whole communities and branches of them exterminated, completely exterminated. Many of you have heard much more recent in history. In 1856, before the uprising of 57, the Sidhu Kano, the Murmu brothers, led the great Hool, the Santal Hool, the great against the British. Out of 60,000 people mobilized, 15,000 and 18,000 were cut dead in the first day of battle. In the first fighting with axes, bows and arrows, against cannon. You can read the memories army of the East India Company's major or colonel saying there wasn't a who was not ashamed of himself that evening at the bravery of these people who kept coming. We would shoot them, they would fall dead, others would beat their drums and advance on us again. You were just like shooting in a barrel of fish. Okay? And this was, they just would not surrender their forests, their rights. Nazis were the first to die for freedom, the last to benefit from it. Always remember this. Then come long before 1857 comes a revolt in Tamil Nadu, where the East India Company nearly collapses. And Veerapandi Kattabomma. It's really unbelievably poorly known the scale of the battles these people fought. The scale of the battles that the Maruda brothers, even Rani Velu Nachiyar, all of them, but the Maruda brothers and Kattabomma, their battles were incredible. This was another part of it. Then comes more and more such risings and uprisings. In the book is an Adivasi woman, Salihan. She was from a village called Saliha, and when she gets married and goes to a new village, there she gets called Salihan, the girl from Saliha. When she was still in her own village, at age 15, 16, they were having in those days, just like you had salt satyagraha in the landlocked regions, you had forest satyagraha. She was not involved. She was not involved in the political mobilization. She was a 15-year-old girl, 16 years. The news came that armed British platoons had entered the village and shot her father. The girls were working in the forest. They are from the Sabat tribe. The Sabat tribe is an extremely poor tribe. By the way, Lord Jagannath does not belong to the Pandas of Katak or Puri. Lord Jagannath was Neela Madhava. He was the deity of the Sabat tribe, and he was appropriated from them 8 centuries ago forcibly. In the 19th century, the Pandas pass an edict that the Sabas cannot enter the Jagannath temple. If you go to rural Odisha, you will see that the Rath is drawn. That's the day all the Adivasis come down from the hills, because Jagannath was an Adivasi deity. He belonged to the Adivasis. Salihan raced back in those days, working in the jungle. Salihan, everybody carried big lathis because you had to sometimes, you ran into wild cats, you ran into monkeys, you ran into very dangerous animals, and you had, so the girls raced back. These were the unmarried girls of that village, working in the fields, working in the as hunter-gatherers, as gatherers. She comes there, she sees her father lying on the ground, Karthik Sabar, a Congress underground organizer, is bleeding from the thigh. She sees the leader of the squadron, of the platoon, with his rifle. She just goes for him with the lathi, beats him to around the village. The other 40 girls, inspired by that, attack the remaining part of the platoon. The platoon flees. They have burnt the food grain stores of the village. Okay, they have destroyed everything. And 40 girls below the age of 16, some might have been 12, 13, like her younger sister, took lathis and attacked people with rifles. Understand the kind of to do that. Yeah. I met Salihan in her last years, in dying of hunger and completely, smiling through the interviews, except at one point. She was beginning to lose it. Okay? I had to ask her the one question that triggered everything back. Very angry when you saw your father lying on the ground, bleeding. After that, she narrated it as if it was happening then, showing us what she did, how. Then she had the long, that guy really must have taken a beating with that lathi. And I asked her, has the government given you any recognition? Have they done anything? She proudly went and brought a certificate given by the local administration on behalf of the Odisha government. Manapatra, certificate of honor, entirely in praise of her father. And Salihan's achievement was to have such a father. The way we have defined freedom fighters has excluded tens of millions of women, the biggest, and Adivasis and Dalits. That's why in the book, by the way, Salihan, I mean, it's just amazing what, there is no ill will, no anger, no saying, I deserve something more. She fought because she had to defend her village, her community, her forest. That was Salihan. So this was the situation with Salihan. Then another myth, Salihan is in the book, the car that day. My friend Purushottam Thakur, Bijoy Sadiz, Jagdish Suna, the last two being Dalit journalists. We travel all over Odisha, Chhattisgarh together. That day, I think the only time in our lives, after meeting Salihan, we traveled 130 kilometers without a sound, each of us in his private tears. We couldn't believe that we had met such graciousness and goodness. Yeah. And you give her, and by the way, her achievement in the certificate is that she has mothered 3 sons. That is the Manapatra, certificate of honor given to Salihan. Then, another thing, you look at the lists of people who come back from Oxbridge. Largely, it's a collection of Brahmins and Vaishyas. Like we sideline the Adivasis, we have also sidelined the Dalits in their history. So the book speaks to the last living Dalit freedom fighter, Shobharam Geharwar. And what a character. By the way, some of these old characters are pretty cantankerous, short-tempered. They're fighters. Okay? They are fighters. Like Malu Swarajam and bit my head off when I asked her some questions. She thought I was stupidly asking, which I had to ask for the sake of the interview and record. So Shobharam Geharwar, in 5 minutes, now here another thing we learned, how incredibly wide the spectrum, ideological and artistic, except for one political philosophy. These people were influenced by innumerable. Shobharam Geharwar, Dalit, self-declared Gandhian, self-declared congressman, but interrupts me, Asli congressman, which means dissident congressman. He doesn't agree with the present dispensation. And admirer of Ambedkar, and asked me, have you come in a jeep? I said, yes. Take me to the Ajmer Market Square. I want to garland Baba Sahib. That was Ambedkar Jayanti. So I took him there. He put the garland. And I asked him, because I knew this guy has temper, and I was trying to bring our present day debates to him, which he demolished in 10 words. How does a Dalit like you, Gandhi and Ambedkar? He got furious. Why should I choose? You. Those principles I remember, I follow those. Those principles of Baba Sahib I remember, I follow those. And he then told me, let me tell you, also part of the revolutionary underground. For 11 years, the self-declared Gandhian made bombs. He also ran an underground courier service, he carried several letters. He met Ambedkar as a 11-year-old, going to give him letters, correspondence, begging his support on particular actions from his leadership. Ajmer was a hot spot. So, and he gave me a beautiful thing when I asked him about these different ideological trends. He said, मैंने दोनों नदियां में गया, both rivers, Gandhivad or Krantivad, the Gandhian path and the revolutionary path. What a never had it before. Telu and Loki Mahato in the book. These are two, by the way, of the living people in the book now. And R. Nallakkannan of Chennai are the youngest. They're still alive, very active. They're the youngest, they're the infants of the group, and they're 98. The oldest member of the group are 104 and 105. Telu Mahato and the brilliant and incredible woman of Purulia, whose story I asked you to read, Babani Mahato. Now, look at how did they look at the struggle and the kind of stereotypes we built. Many people have internalized those stereotypes. Never accepted, okay, Dalits, they never fought, they're celebrating it now. So there was a regiment of the British Army. Please understand that there was a Maratha regiment also. Please understand there's a Gorkha regiment also. As a matter of fact, if you study the history of the Lal Sena and uprisings in your Nagpur area, it was full of that, all in underground revolutionary action. Incidentally, the great Rani of Jhansi, who went out and died on the battlefield, before she went out, they sent out a decoy Rani. This was very common. Encourage the troops. The Rani appearing or the Raja appearing with the sword, encourage the troops. But very often you sent a decoy because of the danger to the real Rani. The woman sent out as the decoy with her child. Her name was Jalkari Devi. She was a Dalit. Jalkari Bai. Yeah. And there is a prize in her name, unfortunately not being given out anymore. But millions of Dalits fought in your freedom struggle. And I one more thing. The width of the spectrum of the freedom struggle is this. Every one of you, go back tonight or when you go back home, talk to your grandparents, and some of you are young enough to have great grandparents. You will find has the story of the freedom struggle. Will you try it? You will find every family. There are a few which have horrible stories that they don't want to tell you. Those were the collaborators. Yeah. But you will find otherwise, all of you, talk to your grandparents about the 40s, 30s. They will tell you of some great uncle, great grand uncle, some great aunt who was times to jail with Gandhi. Every one of you has a story. Reclaim your history. The reason I wrote this book, I wrote this book for 4 reasons. One, I wrote it for the people in it. They deserve to have their stories told, and we, the post 1947 generations, we need their story to better script our own. If you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going. Okay? We need to rediscover, reclaim. That's why I asked you, go back and look at your family. Do you know that, by the way, First World War II, Mesopotamia, yeah, where Dalits and Gurkhas. And we never count the accompanying entourage, the cooks, the cleaners, who were not even armed, they were just cut down by Turkish troops. How many of those people were there? Okay? It infuriates me when people make lists of our top freedom fighters. Constitution, with all its flaws, it has many flaws, is still the finest distillation of the idealism of our freedom struggle. And the chief architect of that constitution, if you do not give him his place amongst the freedom fighters, amongst the top 5 freedom fighters, you are falsifying your history. Okay? Also, one more thing. Every one of these freedom fighters in the book made one distinction. For me, the most important distinction. Freedom is one thing, independence is another. Captain Bhav, whom I'll show you a tiny video of me at the time, the leader of the Tufan Sena, a Maratha warrior from Sangli, said it in one line, the first line of the book on a separate page. Captain Ramchandra Shripati Lal, he was the head of the Tufan Sena, the whirlwind army. In 1943, the princely estate of Satara, not the prince, but the people of the state, declared secession and independence from British rule. Believe it or not, a government of farmers and laborers held Satara for 3 years. Those days, Satara included Sangli. Now it's a separate district. But Sangli was part of Satara. They ruled Sarkar. In 1947, Sangli is called saying, okay, independence has been announced. Now everybody should come back. There were similar uprisings in Chittagong. There were similar uprisings in Koraput. The Lakhad Nayak, who led those, the Koraput Adivasis probably sacrificed more than we will ever know for lack of records. Okay? So you had this unbelievable spectrum, privileged as the first page of the book. We fought for 2 things: freedom and independence. We achieved independence. We fought for freedom and independence. We achieved independence. What is he saying? Every one of them is telling you, freedom is a much larger project than independence. Independence, foreign rule. Freedom is what is enshrined in that constitution, which Ambedkar crafted so carefully: justice, social, economic, political, liberty, equality, fraternity. It is unbelievable. On November 25th, 1949, the last speech in the Constituent Assembly as he hands over the draft constitution and warns us we are entering a world of paradoxes. We have got political democracy today, But in society and economy, there is no democracy, there is no equality, and that will one day political democracy. Where are we today? Huh? 73 years later, truer words were not spoken than that. Today, your inequality in India is the highest since 1921. We will discuss that. Okay. The characters, let me give you a flavor of the characters in this book. The way the rules are defined, 1972 law and 1980 Swatantrata Sainik to qualify for recognition and pension. Idiotically, they tied pension and recognition together. Several of the freedom fighters, like N. Sankaraya, still alive, very articulate at 102 in Chennai. We fought for freedom, not for pensions. They never accepted pensions. The left parties denounced the pension in 1972. They take it. Today, I wish they had. When I see the Telangana fighters in the 80s, no medical help, I wish they had revised their position in the 1980s. Anyway, but a Sankaraya will never accept, Nalakanna will never accept. Incidentally, I'm proud to say after we did stories on them in Tamil Nadu government, Tagesal Tamil, the Tamil Nadu's foremost prize, their equivalent of Bharat Ratna, was successive years given to Sankaraya and Nalak. And oh, let me tell you what the two of them did. Sankaraya accepted the award and said, give the money to the Chief Minister's Relief Fund. They did that. Nalak accepted the award, added 5,000 rupees to the 10 lakhs, and returned it to the Chief Minister's Relief Fund. These freedom fighters, okay? Be proud of them, cherish them. Malu Swaraj, at age 11, was killing Razakars with a slingshot. In 2014, he was present at that meeting in Hyderabad. You also were present at that. In 2014, I put her in front of an audience of one relevant to you guys. The audience was 1,500 techies in the Marriott Hyderabad, mostly between 21 and 26 years old, right? All the thoughts works away. And they gave her standing ovation after standing ovation. But the important, by the way, she went on to use a rifle. And at age 16, a girl, what was she but a girl, led all the armed dalams of Bayaram in Warangal district, the biggest arena of battle against the Nizam. This girl of 16 led male and female dalams. She was the supreme leader of the dalams. By then she was cutting them down with rifles. So I asked her on the stage, do you, slingshot, I've seen Irulas use it as hunters, Bondas. Is it an effective combat weapon? She got mad. Watch her. At that time, she's 84. She stands up, pulls out a sling, removes a cricket ball from the slingshot, saying, I don't want any of you to get hurt. A friend of mine is trying to help her. She says, Oddo, Dabbata. She's telling my friend, back off, you'll get hurt. Okay? And watch Manu Swaraj. These are all 2-minute, 3-minute videos, and I might stop them in between.
దీనిని పట్టుకొని తిప్పి తిప్పి కొట్టే పోలీసులు పక్కా
Ramrod Street.
ఆనాడు 4,000 మంది అమరులైన సామాన్యమైనటువంటి రైతులు హరిజన గిరిజన జనం మా కళ్ళ ముందే ప్రాణాలను అర్పించి పోరాడుతుంటే ఆ పోరాటంలో తుపాకులు అందుకొని రాళ్ళు అందుకొని వర్షాలు తీసుకొచ్చిన పూర్తి ఆ కూడలి దానికి వ్యతిరేకంగా ఊరు ఏకమై గడిల మీద ఇలాంటి ఒడిశాలలో ఒక రాయిందులో బాగుంది. బహుశా ఈ బాల్ కూడా గట్టిగానే ఉంది, మీ దగ్గరకు వస్తే దెబ్బ తాకుతుంది. అందుకని నేను పెట్టుకున్నాను. తిప్పి 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 కొట్టే పోలీసులు పక్కా
దానాలు వేయడం ఒక దానాలు ఏరియా దానాలు నేను కాల్చడంతో నేను పోలీసు మీద పడితే ఎట్లా ఎదిరిస్తారో చెప్పారు. పొడవని తీసుకుపోయి పొడవడం ఆఖరికి నరకమన్నాం మీద పడి అత్యాచారం చేస్తుంటే మరి ఎట్లా అంటే ఎట్లా నరకమన్నాం నరికేది రంగాన్ని నరికేది.
Anyway, it's okay. I just wanted to give you a flavor of these kind of people. Right? Come at this, the last scene you see of her, she is 92. She died last. No. That a year and a half ago, the government of India created a website, 110 crores for the celebration of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The chief achievement of this website, it has not a single photo, not a single story, not a single freedom fighter. It has many photos, and you all know whose photos. The same photo you find on your COVID vaccine certificate, the same photo card, the same photo you will eventually your every gas cylinder and bus ticket. A young generation person looking at the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav website may be forgiven for thinking that it was Mr. Narendra Modi, though he wasn't born when India.
100 years, Narendra Modi will be replaced by Mahatma Gandhi.
You know, well, I hope so for your sake, but my effort is to replace, not to replace, but put in those who actually did the fighting for your freedom. Yeah, these were the people who fought. And there are only 15 of them, but they are very representative of the tens of millions of people. Laborers, cooks. Lakshmi Panda, the cook in the IN, who devastated me with one question in 2007 when we were discussing about her. After which story she got recognition from the Odisha government, but not from the central government. All that woman wanted, she wasn't wanting the pension, she was wanting that she fought for her country's freedom. And she told me this. Because I did not go to jail, I'm not in anger. I trained to cook in the moving camps of Subhash Chandra Bose's Indian National Army being bombed by planes in the jungles, does that mean I am not a freedom fighter? What answer can you give this? What answer in the eye when you're thrashed with a question like that? So there are farmers, laborers, cooks, couriers. A courier, Ganpati Yadav, who every day couriered food into the forests for the revolutionaries of the Tufan Sainath as they went out on armed action. There are cooks, couriers, homemakers. Babani Mahato, who told me repeatedly, I am not a freedom fighter. You're 20 years late, you should talk to my husband. At the end of a day of interviews, we realized she was a far greater freedom fighter than her husband who went to jail for 1 year in the Purulia uprising, the march of the police stations of Purulia on September 29th and 30th, 1942. Incidentally, when I asked them, how could this be part of Quit India movement? Gandhi called in August 8th and you are, they said, sir, even today news reaches us very late. In Purulia in 1942, they got to know about Quit India and Govalia time in early September. These are people at the bowels of the earth. None of whom could read or write. I mean, Telu and Loki at that time could not. Lakshmi Panda, Telu. Now, like her counterpart, equally energetic and devastating was her counterpart in Maharashtra. The book starts, so many women have, okay, what were those laws? There were 7 criteria. You had to apply, 1 or 2 of them you had to tick those boxes. Jail time. Lakshmi read that argument. Second, jail time, you have to produce evidence of your jailing. 1 lakh under trials in the country today who will not be able to provide evidence of their jailing when they're released because they can't afford a lawyer. And you're going to go and get records of 50, 60 years ago in 1980. So I call those the 7 laws of suffering, 7 laws of bureaucratic suffering. Another, your property should have been confiscated. How many Indians own property today? Let alone in 1930 and 1929. Hausabai Patil, I come to that. Mallu Swarajab came from a landlord's family. Her brother, she rebelled. You know what they did? They distributed the 200 acres of the land to the Telangana uprising. She was 14 when they did that. She and her brother distributed that landlord's land. Hausabai Patil was an amazing story. It begins with her being brutalized by her husband. And all these people, by the way, are great stories. This is a big problem with our academics and historians and journalists, particularly, I resent. They're unable to tell the story anymore. You know? They're so busy quoting official voices and bureaucrats and ministers. Hausabai Patil is being beaten to a pulp by her abusive husband in front of the railway station of Sangli and directly opposite the police station in that town in Sangli. She's being beaten to a pulp there. And the police inside the station are calmly watching her being beaten. So, woman being beaten by her husband, no. What's there to fuss about? Normal, standard operating procedure. Perhaps national sport. So then he picks up a rock and tells her, "Now I'm going to smash your skull." Then the police. Guy beating his wife is one thing. Murdering her on your police station doorstep, there will be uncomfortable questions to answer. They came out, pushed them apart. Hausabai said he is very abusive. She is begging her brother on the side, "Take me with you. Give me. I'll take 6 square feet of your land. I'll build a hut and live there." Brother, the good Indian brother, said, "No, you belong to my husband." And the argument went on. Finally, the police and said, "Now get the hell out of here. Just get that bloody train and go to your damn village." Osabai said, "How? We don't have any money. We don't have." Police said, "No, we will do anything to get rid of you from here." And the cops put her and her husband on the train. Osabai says they gave us tickets. I don't know if the police paid for them, but they gave us tickets. And they waved off into the sunset. And the police returned to find Osabai's comrades in the Tufan Sainath had looted the police station of all arms, weapons, money, ammunition. That was not her husband, and the entire drama was a fake, staged to draw the police. Okay? I asked, 72 years later, I asked Hausabai, "What is the sharpest memory of that event?" She had no problem, she had great recall. She was sharp. The sharpest memory of that event. She said, "That scoundrel comrade of mine, he beat me too hard." But she was laughing. And then I said, "Did you tell him to stop?" She was laughing throughout it. I said, "Did you tell him to stop?" She said, "I was screaming at him to stop, telling him you're hitting too hard." And he was saying, no, it has to look authentic, only then the police will stop." And she said that with so much humor and fun, verisimilitude, to convince the police that an actual murder was about to happen. So that's how Sainath. There's a mad village called Panimora in the book. Completely nuts. It's like an asterisk. Official correspondence. You have the British calling them Badmash Town. They're in Burger. Present day Burger was a huge, Kayar, Kalani, these were huge centers of the maximum number of people in the book are yes. Maximum number. Because I wanted to bust that myth that all the fighting was done up in the north. This book has people from east, south, west. Hausabai, Captain Bao, all of them are from west. Northwest, Shobaram Geharo, northwest, Bhagat Singh Jugia, and north, Shobaram Geharwal. To try and write the balance that this was a pan-Indian movement. Everybody participated. Your great-grandparents somehow involved in it. And whether it was Shobaram or Hausabai or any of these people, Panimora, on Quit India Day, they took over, they marched to Sambalpur court and took over the High Court. And these are people narrating the stories to me with great glee in 90s. Panimora is the village with the largest number of Tamrapatras. 32 recognized freedom fighters, which leads to a great resentment in the village because anyway, 32 were recognized, probably the congressman, whatever. So anyway, they took over the court, 3 of them. And they took over the Sambalpur court, dismissed all petitions, and told the assembled petitioners, "You are addressing this to the British authority. We are free India. You have quit India. Take back, readdress your petitions to Mahatma Gandhi, care of Republic of India, and resubmit the petition." Then the police were puzzled. They tried arresting them. These guys said, "The police take orders from us." The police went off to a magistrate. They tried taking these guys' names down. They refused to give their names. The police went to the magistrate, and magistrate said, "I'm not going to sign a warrant without names. Don't be ridiculous." No, somebody playing by the rule book. So they had no names. Then they went to the collector, or that guy said, so there are no names. Write something, write A, B, C. So they wrote A, B, C in the warrant and arrested them as A, B, and C. On the day of appearance in the court, the Peshkar, the court clerk will shout, "Amil Hazir Ho, Sainath Hazir Ho, so and so, show yourself, present yourself." The Peshkar had to shout, "A Hazir Ho, B present yourself, C present yourself." Then they were taken to the prison, where the prison warden refused to accept. He told the police, "Are you nuts? Tomorrow if these guys escape, I'm going to have to explain it in the public that A, B, and C have escaped." They kept on, their whole history was, they were put in a criminal prison at a time when they should have been put in a political prison. The criminal prison, they started converting the other prisoners. The British were offering 500 rupees and a job and food to the family if you recruited for fighting in the World War. If you were recruited to fight. They asked all those others, "This 500 rupees, is your life worth just 500 rupees?" All of them started dropping out from the recruitment. So then they removed them from the criminal prison and put them in a political prison. They went from, the only people who went from rigorous imprisonment to simple imprisonment. Not. So this was their, these were all Gandhians. Everybody was different. Okay? There were staunch congressmen, there were staunch communists, there were people in Maharashtra, there were people who went into the Shetkari Paksh, Peasants and Workers Party, there were people from the Communist Party, there were people influenced by many things. I came to conclude that that generation where at least the freedom, they were, you cannot pigeonhole them. They were, if I have to give a broad description, they were leftists by political persuasion, Gandhian by moral code and conduct. Incidentally, some of India's top communist leaders were exactly like that. EMS Namudri, who had a photo of Mahatma in his office all his life. And a Sundaraya or EMS, how did they dress? They washed their own clothes every morning, right into their 80s. Right into their. Okay? They made their own chai in the morning. That was the influence of Gandhi, the Gandhians. Leftist by persuasion, Gandhian by personal code. There is in the West, I said, not in India, not to be confused with Shahid Bhagat Singh. This wonderful man, when he knew the book was done, When he knew the story was coming, I got a call from his friends and family that he had died. And the journalist from Tribune who went with me told me it was he was waiting to tell his story. When he knew his story had been told, he let go. Shobharam Geharwal, the Dalit freedom fighter of Ajmer, yeah, he's 98 now. Do you know why that man lived? He is protecting the freedom fighters Bhavan, Swatantrata Sainik Bhavan of Ajmer. It's a beautiful piece of property in the center of Ajmer market. He says, sir, he tells me, better merchants around. All these guys, he used very bad words, real estate mafia, they are waiting for me to die to grab this property. He says, I'm staying alive to force the government of Maharashtra, Rajasthan, to nationalize this property. That it is state property. He says, I have been offered crores of rupees. What will I do? What do I need that for? He's a two-time municipal councillor who lives in the same spot, Havel Dalit Basti, where he was born 98 years, not made one paisa in corruption. He is living to say, you know what he is doing? He is living to protect your heritage, the freedom fighters. Yeah. And so these were the kind of in the book. Look at Shobharam Geharwal. I was telling you, Bhagat Singh India. He is called on to receive the prize from the Munshi. Munshi is a very big officer in colonial times. Munshi Bab. And by the way, those days, corporal punishment with any Punjabi here? Tooth chandi. That is a mulberry stick. Mulberry wood stick. It's a horrible thing. Even now it's used as a weapon in Punjab. This little 11-year-old goes on to the stage. World War II has broken out. He was born in 1928, 39. World War II was broken out. And his prize is 1 paisa. By the way, 1 paisa meant something in 1939. Remember, there were half paisa coins also, which meant that you could buy something with this. So, Babu rubbed his shoulder and told him, Bhagat Singh, Nara lagao, give the slogan. Britannia Zindabad, Britannia Zindabad, Hitler. World War II had begun. This little 11-year-old strides to the front of the stage and shouts, Britannia Murdabad, Hindustan Zindabad. And he is thrashed to a little 11-year-old with that mulberry in front. The other children are so shocked, they get up and run away. Then he is expelled and a letter issued by the education officer. This boy, 11 years old, is a dangerous. By the way, they succeeded in making him one. The underground Gaddar party members, all of them, started approaching him. Militant groups approached him, and he became part of the revolutionary underground. Yeah. And these were the sort of characters. Shobharam Geharwal. So these people were influenced by many Gaddar party, Kattabomman tradition, Santal Hul, Gandhi, Subhash Bose. They aged 97 and 102, 104. They say, I asked them who your heroes are. Their hero at the state level was Subhash Bose. They are Bengalis, is that their hero at the national level was Gandhi, a towering distant figure whom they would never meet. But like so many millions of other Indians, he had that influence. Who was their local hero? Three dacoits of the Robin Hood variety. You know, see how they reached. They did not see any. Shobaram did not see any contradiction in this. I asked Shobaram though, was there any political force that did not participate? He said, this yellow jo baita hai abhi, the fellow sitting there now, they never participated. Are you saying the RSS did not participate? See what he says.
हम जो है बम बनाते हम बोल भी दिया दो घंटे में खुद तो हम लोग पकड़े जाएंगे भैया तो मुझे बच्चे जाके छोड़ भी देंगे चंद्रसेना का अभियान में एक और था वो फैक्ट्री तो भेजा के फिर उन्होंने बोली shit.
Let's continue.
चंद्रसेना का अभियान में एक और था वो फैक्ट्री में तो भेजा के फिर उन्होंने बोली जो और वो चिट्ठियों को भी डाक को पहुंचाना बड़ा मायने रखता था तो हमारी जोड़ी बनाई हमें ट्रेनिंग दी कि भाई इस माफी क्या आपको ये चिट्ठी फलाने जगह पहुंचानी है बड़ौदा में देनी है डॉक्टर वेट कर दो स्वतंत्र जाने में पूछता नहीं ना कोई किताब है जो पढ़ेगा ना हमने सारे क्या मालूम ये सब खाने देश अभी अभी तो स्वतंत्र संग्राम में आरएसएस इतना उम्र नहीं करती
Okay, so I'm sorry, I mean, if you have any questions, you can hold it there and I can show you a couple of more. Want to see that? Here, look at Captain Wow. And I strongly suggest you talk to Nalakanna and Shankaraya. You can get them virtually on Zoom. No, or they can even give you a message on what the
last
this is
Footsoldiers of Indian freedom. Sainath has written this book with the intention of spotlighting of countless heroes and heroines of the common people of India in the fight against British imperialism. Today, when rightist reactionary criminal forces are trying to take the country backward, it is the duty of the freedom fighters who fought for the freedom of the country and the supporters to come forward to do all in their power to strengthen a secular democratic and progressive state of the Indian Union.
Stopping it there so that you can. Shankaraya joined politics at age 9. And it was astonishing how he did that. Both of them are from Tirunelveli. Shankaraya at age 9. I did not know, though I had known him for many years. He said, people are in politics. At 9, in a place like Tirunelveli, which by the way has a great revolutionary tradition going back to Kattabomma, Shankaraya people came the execution of Bhagat Singh, and 9-year-old Shankaraya ran out onto the street with them. The first of the interviews which go into the book with him is when he is 9. And he recalls each minute of that running out onto the street. And he says, there wasn't a person who was not in tears over the news of Bhagat Singh's death. This is Captain Captain Ram. I told you about the Tufan Sena. His achievement, one of his achievements, by the way, was the biggest train robbery in our history. Mumbai, they hit the Pune and Miraj special goods train carrying the payroll of the Bombay presidency, or part of it, or whatever. I tried giving conversions of what the money worth was. That was worth about 80,000 price. Then they hit the Nandurbar Khazana, where they lifted 6.16 lakhs of cash. You know what they did with this money? 43 years of famine. They distributed it among starving peasants and workers. And here's another guy with a temper. I asked him, so when did you join the Tufan Sena? What do you mean? I started the damn thing. You know, that sort of response. He was such a legend by 46. When he's arrested and spends days in jail, I asked him that, were you tortured in jail? He says, I was treated like the king's guest because all the wardens and police in the jail were in awe of him. The 600 villages of Satara.
रामचंद्र श्रीपती लाड कॅप्टन भाऊ या नावानं सगळीकडे परिचित असताना मी मारून 1942च्या स्वातंत्र्याच्या.
Are you able to read the? Oh, incidentally, to jog his memory, his family said some days he's great, some days he's cloudy. So what we did, we went to his house, took his personal chair, took the chair to the spot on the railway track where he had attacked the train, and kept it there. And he sat quiet for 10 minutes, spoke for 1 hour.
मध्ये वयाच्या 15-16व्या वर्षी मी सामील झालो. तुफान सेना मी स्थापनच केली. त्याच्यामुळे सामील होण्याचा प्रश्नच येत नाही. ती सेना स्थापन केली आणि त्या सेनेमध्ये आम्ही जिल्ह्यातील सर्व लोकांना ट्रेनिंग द्यायला सुरुवात केलं. इंग्रज तर गेलंच पाहिजे, परंतु त्याच्यानंतर मिळणारं स्वातंत्र्य आहे ते जनतेचं स्वातंत्र्य झालं पाहिजे, हा आमचा त्याचा मुख्य दावा होता आणि त्या पद्धतीनं आम्ही आमचे प्रयत्न करतो. गाडी आने के पहिले 15 मिनिट या 70 रखा गाड़ी में आगे गाडी आली आणि गाडीने ते दगड धोके पाहिले. गाडी रुकली गेली. पाठीमाग आमची दुसरी फळी उभा होती. त्या फळीनं लगेच पाठीमाग गाडीला रोखली गाडीवरती त्या रुळावरती दगड रोखली, गाडी जागेवर थांबली, त्याच्यामुळे गाडी पुढे जायना, गाडी मागेही जाईना, पगाराचीच गाडी होती, त्याच्यामुळे पगाराचे पैसे होते ते घेतले आणि निघून गेलो. भूमिगत लोकांना जीवन करण्याकरता आणि ज्या ठिकाणी काही खर्च करावा लागेल त्या ठिकाणी खर्च करण्याकरता त्या पैशाचा वापर केला. घरगुती स्वरूपात कोणी पैशाचा वापर केला नाही. गाडी लुटली म्हणतात हा आमच्यावरती अन्याय आहे, आमचाच पैसा आम्ही हस्तगत केला. गाडी लुटली नाही, आमचा पैसा आम्ही घेतला. पोलीस सुद्धा आमच्याकडे यायला भेट होती. सरकारचा आदेश म्हणून रात्री संरक्षणाला हात लावायची ताकद नव्हती पाहिजे, अशी ती अवस्था होती. आणि औंधला तर काय राजाच्या घरी असल्यासारखं करतो, राजाच्या घरी असल्यासारखं. स्वातंत्र्याच्या जनतेच्या स्वातंत्र्याच्या कल्पना भव्य आणि दिव्य आहे, पण त्या पद्धतीनं आम्ही स्वातंत्र्य राबवतोय असं वाटत नाही. ठराविक लोकांची मक्तेदारी देण्याची अवस्था झालेली आहे. ज्याच्या हाती ससा तो पारधी अशी अवस्था झालेली आहे त्या स्वातंत्र्याची.
You know, there are hundreds of people like this. They're not necessarily articulate, because I had to drop 2 from the northeast, they died. Otherwise we'd have had them from there also. But imagine that a Sankaraya, a Nalakanna, a Captain Bow, who died a few months ago, none of these kind of people find a place in your Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav website. You know that this is your golden generation. Look at the spirit and look at the fact. 75 years after independence, they're still active, they're still fighting, they still stand for some principles. For me, and how this is from whom I learned the difference between independence and freedom. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, sir, for the insightful talk. So now the floor is open for questions. So I request the students to keep it a bit short, as we are also running short of time.
Thank you, sir. Congratulations on your work. So, my question to you is, what's your take on rewriting India's history to match current political narrative and promote communal polarization at times, even erasing our composite culture by renaming cities like Allahabad to Prayagraj? What's your take on it?
See, there is nothing wrong in retelling history generation to generation. Even revisiting history is a good and healthy exercise to take note of new evidence that can give rise to new interpretations. But what you are referring to is not revisiting history, it's inventing history. It's inventing past for people who don't have one. And it is a very, and note the fact that your media don't say a word in protest. Okay, let me give you one specific. Not only are they reinventing history, they're even rewriting their own rewriting. In 1992, I don't know, maybe some of the older generation people here will remember a very fine leader of the BJP called A.R. Malkani. K.R. Malkani was a founding vice president of the BJP. In 1992, there was a film serial made by Sanjay Khan, The Sword of Tipu Sultan, over whom you are hearing such cries of anguish and agony and fury in Karnataka today. So Tipu Sultan, the Bharatiya Janata Party, please understand what Malkani's credentials were. The only man, he was a fellow journalist and I knew him in that capacity. I was very young and he was very senior, very amiable fellow, and the only journalist, only RSS man to have been editor of both the Hindi and the English organs of the RSS, Panchjanya and organizer. Nobody else served 35 years as editor of organizer. I think you'll agree that gives him firm RSS credentials. The BJP appointed him founding vice president. They appointed him as a one-man enquiry committee because he fancied himself as a historian and asked him to inquire what was this Tipu Sultan actually like. He was in touch with many of us. He did his due diligence, okay? He spoke to all of us who had different views. And I know that we suggested books and historians and stuff to him, which he actually read. I mean, he was even willing to read a volume of People's Publishing House. Okay? After some months, he gave his verdict. Please know that you can buy this book off the net tonight if you like. It's called India First on Amazon. There are various chapters, incidentally, where he is very honest about the position, the true position of the RSS on the national anthem and the flag, which he also wrote for me when I was deputy chief editor of the Blitz, in which he denounced this flag and denounced the Janagana Mana as a paean of tribute by Tagore to the British king. That was the position of the RSS. Okay? Suddenly in power, they are trying to punish people who don't uphold the flag. Anyway, he came to the conclusion after all his reading, one of the essays is on Tipu Sultan. Summary of what he says, including a few quotes verbatim. The only Indian prince who died fighting the British on the battlefield. Second, he says Tipu's courage was what made him be called Tiger Tipu. He says even now, and which is true even now, in the V&A Museum in Britain, there is a gift given by the French to Tipu of a tiger roaring at a British soldier and going for him with its teeth. It was a mechanical device, it works even now. Tipu, by the way, which he doesn't mention in that essay, the People's Publishing House and several other historians do. In the last months of his rule, do you know that Tipu Sultan was deeply influenced by the American Revolution and even more by the French Revolution? He sent a huge contribution, which he mentions, Malkani mentions, a gift of money to Benjamin Franklin and a note of praise. The French Revolution had such an impact on Tipu. This part he doesn't mention, you can see it elsewhere. He abolishes titles in his royal court and calls himself Citizen Tipu. Yeah? What an extraordinary character. And you're talking about someone who, late 18th century. Yeah, he abolishes long before privy purses and titles are abolished in India. He abolishes royalty titles and says, I am citizen Tipu, you are citizen Purana and Purnava and other Punnaya and others. Yeah. He says, Balkani says, when the news of Tipu reached the state, the East India Company directors raised a toast to the conquest of Hindustan. And Balkani's the closing paragraph, founder, vice president of the Bharatiya Janata Party, lifelong RSS cadre. The killing of Tipu Sultan set India's independence back by 150 years, almost exactly two. Okay? He says he was the one royal who did not compromise with the British, neither he nor his father. That is my answer to your question, that now they are inventing history. So I have no respect for that, and I don't think we should waste time on it. Question?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the talk. Mine is kind of a follow-up. So, given they are also trying to say tweak textbooks in schools and all, and how do you believe, the alternative approach that you spoke about, the people's approach? Do you believe it can be incorporated in textbooks somehow?
So I'll tell you two things. One is the people's approach has a different level of people. My answer to your question, a different level of people's approach to history has already happened. Okay, in the late 60s and early 70s, the Romila Thapars, the Harbans Mukhiyas, the Bipin Chandras, the K.N. Panikars, the S. Bhattacharyas did bring that kind of approach. And by the way, the then RSS dominated government that came to power in 1977 banned those books, had them withdrawn from the NCERT. That is another story altogether. Now, the thing is, history, by the way, is always written by victors. So that's why in the first phase also, the Shankarayas and the Mallu Swarajams were never going to be included in the textbooks. I'm not even saying that it's important that these specific individuals be there. I'm saying the role of ordinary people as against the great man theory of history is what I want to see. The second, so those books were banned in this. Now the kind of books, Karnataka book, which they now qualify as creative writing. Savarkar, every day from the jail in Andamans, flew on the wings of a bulbul to the mainland and went. Why on earth he went back is beyond me. No? The bulbul brought him out. The bulbul